the phone himself at any time and called the Attorney General. The president also had a full staff of executive employees right down the hall. So this made me wonder. The president thought what he was doing was legal. Why didn't he just pick up the phone and call the Attorney General Sessions, or why not ask? Clear to me that the reason he went to you, Mr. Lewandowski, is because everyone said no. So I want to ask you about that. 2 days before meeting you, the president had called White House counsel McGahn at home on a Saturday to fire the special counsel, saying, and you can see that on the screen, Mueller has to go. Call me back when you do it. Plain and simple. But McGahn refused. When the president asked you to deliver that message, did he, the president, tell you that 2 days before your meeting, his White House counsel had refused to fire the special counsel? Volume 1186 is where you find that language. Volume 2. When the president asked you, did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Congressman?
When the president asked you to deliver that message, did he, the president, tell you that 2 days before your meeting, his White House counsel had refused to fire the special counsel?
The White House has directed me that I not disclose the substance of any conversations with the president.
You are not allowed to answer whether the president told you he called his counsel at home on Saturday to remove the special counsel, and his counsel said no. The president had also personally called Sessions at home and asked him to unrecuse himself and oversee the special counsel's investigation, and Sessions said no. When the president asked you to deliver his message to Sessions, did the president tell you that Sessions had already said no? Volume 2, page 107?
Again, Congressman, I recognize that the privilege is not mine, but I've been asked by the White House to... Congressman, I'd be happy to answer your question, or you can just have a conversation by yourself. But if you'd like to ask me a question, I'll be happy to answer.
I'm going to continue. The reason is
well, then don't ask me a question if you don't want to hear my answer.
My time. This is a House judiciary, not a House party.
So if you ask me a question, give me the opportunity to answer your question.
The very campaign the special counsel is investigating. I'd like my time restored, please, of his interruption. So he was a witness to the special counsel's investigation. For that reason, Sessions said publicly that federal law prohibited his involvement in the special counsel's investigation. Here's a quote from the report from Volume 2, pages 49 to 50, which is on the screen. You can read that. Yes or no? Did the president tell you that the Attorney General was legally not allowed to take any part in to deliver him a note about that very investigation? Did the president tell you that?
What you've just read is not on the screen, Congressman.
You need to look at the screen. Yes or no? Read the screen.
You're welcome to read it, Congresswoman.
You're welcome to be stalling, and I'm not going to stall. You either answer the question yes or no.
Congressman, I'll take the same privileges that you've had other members.
Tell you that nobody at the White House was supposed to even contact the Attorney General about the investigation? That you can answer yes or no.
I will not disclose any conversations I've had with the president, Congressman.
Again, you are obviously here to block any reasonable inquiry into the truth or not of this administration. The White House counsel, quote, shortly after Sessions announced his recusal, directed that Sessions should not be contacted about the special counsel investigation. In fact, the White House counsel's internal notes state no contact with Sessions and no communication serious about instruction. Can you read that? I just said it. Can you read that? Did you hear me?
Yes. Is there a question?
Yes. Did the president tell you his White House counsel told him no contact with Sessions because of serious concerns of obstruction when he asked you to deliver a message to Sessions?
I am respecting the executive branch privilege of confidentiality, and I will recognize that this time.
Let me just say that did you know the president was putting you at risk when he asked you to deliver a message to the Attorney General? I want to be very clear. The president knew what he was doing was wrong because everyone else had already said no. He called his White House counsel to fire the special counsel. McGahn said no. He called the Attorney General to ask him to unrecuse himself from the special counsel's investigation. Sessions said no. His White House counsel said there should be no contact with Sessions because of his recusal. So what does the president do? He calls you in to do what everyone else wouldn't do. He called you in to do his dirty work in secret because he knew it was wrong. Well, we will expose the truth. The president can hide behind you any longer. And you should be here to be telling the truth, General Lewandowski, because the truth will set you free and the American people. I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The witness may answer the question.
I don't believe there was a question, Congressman.
Very well.
Yes, there was.
Could you repeat the question? I didn't hear it.
I'll be happy to repeat the
It's just
question.
a rant.
Yeah, repeat the
I'll
question.
be happy to repeat the
Gentlelady's
question.
time has expired. The gentleman from
Did you know the Attorney General
Gen-
had recused?
the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewandowski, thank you for appearing this afternoon to testify before this committee. I understand that you've spent many hours testifying voluntarily before Congress over the last few years. Isn't that correct?
It is.
And have you had to hire and retain counsel to represent you for all the investigations that you've had to endure simply because you served as the president's campaign manager?
Yes, sir.
That's unfortunate because you didn't solicit or receive assistance from the Russians, did you?
No, sir.
Are you an agent working on behalf of the Russian government?
No, sir.
As a close friend and advisor of the president, you don't believe that the president is working on behalf of the Russian, do you?
Absolutely not.
And to your knowledge, there is no effort on the part of the president to intentionally obstruct justice, is there?
No, sir.
Thank you. And yet again, coming here to tell this committee what we, Special Counsel Mueller and the American public already know, that President Trump did not collude with the Russians, nor did he obstruct justice. That's not to say that the Russians weren't trying to interfere and influence our 2016 presidential election. It's clear that they were, by sending fake texts, operating fake Facebook pages, and holding fake rallies, all in an effort to try to influence the outcome of the election. Democrats want to ignore all of the real evidence of Russian interference and hold this fake impeachment because it happened under a different president's watch. This all happened under President Obama's watch, isn't that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was the Obama administration that failed to protect us from the Russian interference and influence in our election. Isn't that also true?
Yes.
President Trump wasn't president. He wasn't the one that failed to protect the country. If anybody failed, it was the Obama administration. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. We're wasting valuable committee time engaging in this impeachment investigation. The fact of the matter is, one thing this committee could be doing is to question Inspector General Horowitz concerning the bias against the president at the origins of the Russian investigation. We could be questioning Horowitz about his recent report how then FBI Director Comey mishandled department memos. This committee has such a rich history, has jurisdiction over a whole lot of very significant things. We're spending our time on this fake impeachment, but we could be focused on something that really matters, like immigration, asylum. We have hundreds of thousands of people that have entered our southern border. Generally, they're brought up either individually or in groups, caravans, usually, oftentimes connected with cartels. Cartels make a lot of money when they come up here. They're told the magic words, come across the border. They say that they're in fear and come right into our country, and we put them on a bus or on a plane, and they're sent to communities all across the country. That's something this committee should be working in a bipartisan manner to do something about. Opioids. We had about 70,000 Americans who lost their lives to opioids last year. That's something in the jurisdiction of this committee. Yet, we do virtually nothing about it in this committee. Balanced budget amendment. It's something I've introduced in this Congress. We got a $22 trillion debt hanging over our head. Yet we do nothing in this committee about attempting to actually pass something that would make us balance the budget every year, like all our states have to do. So finally, I just want to thank you again, Mr. Lewandowski, for appearing at today's hearing. Perhaps your testimony today will finally convince Democrats that there are much more important things that this committee could be spending our time on, rather than continuing to pursue this fake impeachment, a faux impeachment. The bottom line is they don't have the votes in the House to move forward, for the House to vote for this committee to open up an impeachment inquiry. They don't have the votes. Some of the Democrats want to vote for it. Some of the Democrats would vote against it, but they don't have the votes. So what they do is they spend valuable committee time that we could be spending on other important things on this faux impeachment. And it's a shame, because this committee could be doing so much more on behalf of the American people. With that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Who states the point of parliament? Gentleman will state his point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Chairman, the witness just answered a long line of questions from the gentleman from Ohio about whether Donald Trump had colluded with the Russians and about the origins of the Mueller investigation and so on, but he never testified as to any of those things before Special Counsel Mueller. Can he now continue to invoke this White House rationale that he's confined to the four corners of the Mueller report when he's gone way beyond it in his responses to the questioning from the gentleman from Ohio?
Regardless of whether he went beyond the four corners of the Mueller report and the answers that he gave to the last questioner, regardless of that, and I'm glad to hear he favors the Patriots, even though that's not in the Mueller report. But regardless of the long series of answers that he gave, irrelevant, that weren't in the Mueller report, the claim of privilege made by the witness is improper for the reasons set forth in our letter today to the White House and to the witness's counsel. That said, I will take the claim of privilege under advisement.
Mr. Chairman, parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state his
Did
parliamentary.
you actually answer his parliamentary inquiry? Because it was a statement, not a parliamentary inquiry. You just sort of skipped on to executive privilege here. At least acknowledge that it was not a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman stated the parliamentary inquiry.
He did not. That was a statement.
I answered his parliamentary inquiry. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lewandowski, it's been made clear here you were not an employee and you admitted it at the White House. You had no W-2, you had no card, you had nothing. You were not an employee. And you were a policeman at one time. So you know something about the law and about following the law. Didn't you think it was a little strange that the president would sit down with you one-on-one and ask you to do something that you knew was against the law? Did that strike you as strange?
I disagree with the premise of your question, Congressman.
You weren't a policeman?
I didn't think the president asked me to do anything illegal.
You didn't think it would have been illegal for you to ask Mr. Sessions to drop the investigation and to just go on to future presidents and omit everything with this president, go ollie ollie in free? We're going to start with the next one about colluding with Russia. You didn't think that was illegal to obstruct justice?
Congressman, the president didn't ask me to do anything illegal.
Obviously, you've never been a judge and won't be one. All these people asked you. He gave you dictation. He dictated to you a message to give Sessions. Had you ever been a secretary for the president before and taken dictation or shorthand?
Many times.
Oh, we got your qualifications now. You were a secretary. But he asked you outside of White House channels, and that's what Mueller wrote, that this was outside of White House channels. Could it have been he asked you to get the message to Sessions because he thought you would do whatever he asked, even if it was illegal or immoral? Just like your former boss, Bob Ney, who said you were an implementer. News reports called you the president's, quote, enforcer. USA Today said Lewandowski's background is largely as a Trump guy, not so much as a strategist, not a campaign manager, but as a right-hand man, a body man, and an enforcer. And Esquire went further and said the one-time campaign manager for Donald Trump has the traits of an enforcer and the conflict resolution skills to match. And you've even described yourself in your book, Let Trump Be Trump. You said we were fine with whatever role the president wanted us to play. In Donald Trump's army, there were only loyal soldiers. There were no more loyal soldiers. Your previous boss, Bob Ney, was convicted of corruption and lying to authorities in the Jack Abraham scandal. You were fired from Americans for Prosperity after being accused of fraud, voter fraud. You are now involved in this. Either you were willing to break the law for politics and Mr. Trump, or you're some kind of a Forrest Gump relating to corruption. So maybe let me ask you this. Did the president pick you as enforcer? He thought you would play whatever role he wanted because it was illegal? Is that possibly why he chose you to take this message to Sessions?
That'd be a question for the president, Congressman.
Well, Donald Trump was right, though. First, the White House counsel Don McGahn refused to fire the special counsel. Mr. McGahn showed principle and character and refused to do what he knew would be an illegal act. Then Attorney General Sessions, who had recused himself, was asked to unrecuse himself. But Attorney General Sessions also did the right thing. And he said, I'm not going to unrecuse myself because I'd have a conflict, because I was involved in the campaign and do some things, can't do it. Then the White House counsel advised the president not even to contact Sessions. But you, his loyal soldier, would do it. You were different than Sessions and McGahn. Trump could depend on you. You did not ask any questions. You were a loyal soldier. You just wrote down the message and agreed to deliver it. That's what he thought. You took the dictation, you gave it to Hope Hicks. You asked her to type it up for you, not that you couldn't have done it yourself, I'm sure, and then asked somebody else to deliver the message to Sessions when you decided not to. Donald Trump talked to you outside normal channels so there'd be no record of anything that he asked you to do to obstruct justice. Nothing to do with that at all. The president knew what he was doing was wrong. Mr. Sessions knew what he was doing was wrong. Mr. McGahn knew what he was doing was wrong. You seemed to be the only person who didn't think it was wrong. But Mr. Trump was wrong, because at the last minute, you got cold feet. You chickened out. The president's trust was misplaced. You decided not to do what you told the president you were going to do, and you handed it off to somebody else. Did you realize at some point that Mr. Ney, your former boss, got involved in criminal problems and went to prison, and maybe you were going to be the next one? Did that cross your mind? Did you ever think about Bob Ney's situation and going to prison?
Congressman Ney, Congressman, so we're clear, went to jail many years after I left his employment. I'm sure you're going to clarify that for the record.
And you were his employee, and you had great respect for him, but you learned from that. I'm asking, did you learn from his experience and realize that what you were asked to do was illegal, and you didn't want to follow the same trail as Bob Ney and end up in prison?
I wasn't asked to do anything illegal, Congressman.
Well, the public will determine that. This has been more obstruction of Congress by this administration, and you followed their instructions, and you're doing just exactly what they thought you'd do. You were a loyal soldier, except you didn't follow Trump's instructions. You chickened out at the last minute. You got cold feet. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewandowski, you ran President Trump's campaign between January 2015 and June 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
You were at the helm of the campaign when President Trump secured the Republican nomination.
Yes.
Pretty good campaign you ran.
Thank you.
I mean, you beat, 17, 18 different opponents, senators, governors, some good senators. Of course, you had a pretty good candidate.
The best.
Pretty good candidate who I think has done a great job as president of the United States. After you left the campaign, I think you left in June of 2016. After you left the head of the campaign, were you still involved with the campaign throughout the rest of the election, all the way up through November 8th, 2016?
Yes.
In that entire time. So you were part of the campaign operation at some level or another from January 2015 to November 8th, 2016. During that entire time, did you guys ever work with Russia to impact the election?
No.
You know what's interesting, Mr. Lewandowski? When Jim Comey was asked that same question, sitting at that same table, he gave the same answer. When Bob Mueller was asked that same question, sitting at that same table, he gave the same answer. Falsely accused, the president is falsely accused of colluding with a foreign state to impact the election. Jim Comey, when we deposed him at that very table, said after 10 months of investigation, we didn't have a thing. Bob Mueller gets named special counsel. He wastes $30 million of taxpayer money, 22-month investigation. He sits at that table just a few weeks ago and gives the same darn answer. These guys over here, they don't care. They don't care. They don't want to get to what Mr. Chavez said. They don't want to figure out how the false accusation happened. They just want to drag people in front of this committee and keep trying to find some way they can go after the president. Let's go back to the process that the ranking member raised. Did you testify in front of the Senate Intel Committee in 2017?
Yes.
Did you testify in front of the House Intelligence Committee in 2017?
Yes.
And you went before the special counsel and answered his questions in 2018. Is that right?
It is.
And you did that all voluntarily?
Yes.
No subpoena?
No, sir.
Said, I'm willing to comply, give answers, answer all the questions you got.
Yes.
I think in your opening statement you said 20-something. How many hours did you sit in front of those various committees?
More than 20.
More than 20 hours. And for this committee, did you get a letter from this committee back in March asking you to comply with certain documented requests that Chairman Nadler wanted to have?
I believe so, yes.
And you and your legal team complied with that?
Yes, sir.
And then on June 24th, you got another letter. Is that right?
Yes.
June 24th of this year, you got another letter asking you to do an interview, a transcribed interview in front of the committee. And your lawyer contacted Chairman Nadler and said, we'd be happy to do that. Is that right?
Yes.
Said, give us some dates. We'll come in. We'll be happy to sit for an interview.
That's right.
What happened next?
Next, about 5 weeks ago, the committee issued a subpoena for my appearance.
So you're willing to come voluntarily, just like you did with Senate Intel, House Intel, just like you did for Bob Mueller, for the special counsel, 20-some hours. You're willing to do that all. You complied with when they asked you for certain documents. Then when they want you to come in for an interview, you said, all right, sure, we'll do it. They hit you with a subpoena.
Correct.
And then they start calling you names, saying, close up that book, answer the question, start treating you this way. Kind of interesting. They're the ones who started it. They're the ones who slapped you with a subpoena when you were willing to come here voluntarily.
I was.
And then they question what the demeanor you bring here today. I mean, first they changed the rules last week in the middle of the Congress, changed the rules of the committee in the middle of the game, and then today they're not even going to follow the rules because the rules they changed last week talk about staff asking questions after members are done. We got this whole issue with consultants. So maybe we would be better served if we did exactly what Mr. Shabbat said. Maybe we would be better served as the House Judiciary Committee if we actually focused on how this whole false accusation started in the first place. What do you think, Mr. Lewandowski?
I think it'd be a great idea.
Great idea. Maybe the American people would be better served than spending more time investigating something that's already had 32 months of investigation from both Jim Comey and the FBI and Bob Mueller and the special counsel. Maybe we would do that. And you know a great place to start? Great place to start, Mr. Chairman? I asked you about this 1 week ago today. Great place to start would be the Inspector General's report that was issued just 3 weeks ago. The scathing report about Jim Comey. That'd be a nice place to start. But when I asked the chairman when we might have an opportunity to question Mr. Horowitz, he said, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Of course you haven't thought about that. Too busy trying to impeach the president. Too busy slapping subpoenas on Corey Lewandowski. Of course you haven't thought about that's what the committee should be focused on. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewandowski, you are about like a fish being cleaned with a spoon. It's very hard to get an answer out of you. But let me ask you this, sir. Based on the president's past statements, everybody knows that the president does not like for anybody to take notes when he's talking. In fact, he asks lawyers not to take official notes, and you're aware of that, correct?
I'm aware of the public account, sir.
All right, fair enough. But when the president met with you in the Oval Office one-on-one on June 19th, 2017 to dictate a message to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he told you to, quote, write this down. Isn't that correct?
That's accurate.
And it was just you and the president in that meeting, correct?
It was.
And you knew that you needed to write down as fast as possible what the president was telling you so that you could make sure to capture the content of what he was telling you correctly, correct?
I don't know if speed of writing was a criteria, but I tried to capture it to the best of my ability, Congressman.
Thank you, sir. And he dictated to you exactly what he wanted you to put into the mouth of Attorney Jeff Sessions, correct?
I believe he asked me to deliver a message for Jeff to consider delivering himself.
And it was a message that he intended for Jeff, meaning Jeff Sessions, to deliver out loud and publicly. He wanted the public to know what he was saying, but he wanted Jeff to say it, correct?
I believe the Mueller report accurately depicts that.
And Mr. Lewandowski, we've projected on the screen the message that the president dictated to you that he wanted you to deliver to the Attorney General. It's on the screen, and I'd like for you to read the first two sentences if you would entertain that.
Oh, as Director Mueller stated when asked to read from the report, and I quote,
No.
I would be happy to have you read it, Congressman.
Look on the, well, would you prefer for me to read it instead of you?
Please.
Okay. It says, I know that I recused myself from certain things having to do with specific areas, but our POTUS is being treated very fairly. That's what he told you to write down, and that's what you wrote down. And I'll continue. He said, he shouldn't have a special prosecutor counsel because he hasn't done anything wrong. Now, that's what he wanted you to deliver to Attorney General Jeff Sessions, correct?
I believe that's an accurate.
And he wanted you to deliver it to Jeff so that Jeff could say it to the people, right?
I believe so.
And you felt kind of squeamish, like that fish that you are trying to be right now, being scaled. You felt a little squeamish about delivering that message, correct?
No, sir.
Well, why didn't you? Why did it take you so long and you never even delivered it?
Correct. I never delivered the message.
Yeah, you chickened out.
I went on vacation.
Went on vacation. And so you put the message in the safe, in your home for safekeeping, correct? Before you went on vacation.
I took my kids to the beach, Congressman. That's more of a priority.
President Trump was hounding you about when are you going to deliver that message, correct?
Completely inaccurate, Congressman.
Well, he asked you about it a few times, didn't he?
No, he did not.
He never asked you whether or not you had delivered the message?
Not on multiple occasions, no.
One occasion, okay? He did mention it on one occasion to you.
I don't know if that's in the report, sir, or not.
And you told him that, yeah, I'm gonna get around to it. I'm gonna deliver it, correct?
I'd have to see the reference to the Mueller report where that is, sir.
It's in the report, and everybody.
You direct me to the book and page so I can review that?
I don't need to waste any time with that, but let me tell you something. The next three sentences after those first two, would you read those, please?
You're welcome to, Congressman.
Okay, he said he shouldn't have a special prosecutor or counsel because he hasn't done anything wrong. I was on the campaign with him for 9 months. There were no Russians involved with him. I know it for a fact because I was there. Now, the president wanted Attorney General to say that, but you didn't deliver the message. And you knew that Attorney General Sessions had recused himself at that time. And since he had recused himself, you knew that it would have been against the law for him to comment in any way on that investigation. Isn't that right?
I did not know that.
You did not know that. You did not know that.
Correct.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you for putting up with the harassment that you're putting up with right now. According to the Alliance for Securing Democracy, Russia interfered in the elections of Belarus, Bulgaria, Canada, Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Germany, Hungary, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Montenegro, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Turkey, United Kingdom, Ukraine, and the United States. They specifically targeted the Scottish independence vote, the Brexit vote, and Angela Merkel. Despite knowledge of these kinds of election threats, the Obama administration sat idly by. Instead of warning the Trump campaign, Loretta Lynch's DOJ and James Comey's FBI used secret surveillance to spy on members of the Trump campaign, all while allowing election interference to occur. Why isn't this hearing focused on holding DOJ and FBI leadership accountable for this kind of terrible malfeasance and lack of judgment? What was Putin's ultimate goal? Clint Watts, a former FBI agent and counterterrorism specialist, said it is to attack and undermine democracy. He said the goal is to leave voters feeling as if, quote, either the institutions are corrupt or you can't trust the vote, end of quote. This is the kind of classic disinformation campaign that the KGB runs. And as we all know, Vladimir Putin was a former leader of the KGB. In 2016, Putin's goal could have been very simple. Divide the American electorate, sow seeds of distrust, make it impossible for whoever won our election to govern. With America weakened at home, we would be weakened on the international stage. Putin wins with a weakened America, regardless of who won the election. This is the kind of approach that has been used by the communists in Russia for nearly a century. After overthrowing Russian Tsar Nicholas II in 1917, Vladimir Lenin, and the communists utilized Western journalists as propaganda tools to defend communism. New York Times journalist John Reed, for example, defended the Bolsheviks advocating against American intervention. Lenin used even the term useful idiots to describe how leftist-leaning, communist-sympathizing Americans could be easily tricked and used to help the Russians. For the past 3 years, Democrats have focused on undermining America's president instead of working with President Trump and Republicans in Congress to harden our election defenses. I think there would be broad bipartisan support that we need to prevent future election meddling. The Mueller report makes clear that President Trump wanted to focus on protecting our democracy from future attacks. So I have one question, Mr. Lewandowski. It's clear that Putin attacked America with the goal of dividing the American people, and today's hearing is being held for the sole purpose of attacking America's president, which will weaken our country on the international stage. Do you believe that Vladimir Putin is sitting in his office right now in the Kremlin, laughing at what those on the other side of the aisle are doing, and believing that those on the other side of the aisle are useful idiots helping?
Objection. I have a point of order.
And the lady will state her point of order.
I have a point of order. According to the rules and the rules of this committee and the House rules, we cannot attribute derogatory names to our colleagues or motives to our colleagues. The gentleman said those on the other side of the aisle are idiots. This is a very sacred and somber responsibility. I've taken an oath of office, my good friend, just like you did. I am concerned about the Constitution just as you are, and I would not engage in any behavior that could be described as idiot. Never in my life or my colleagues have we ever discussed behaving like idiots. Mr. Chairman, that is an inappropriate terminology and description of the members of this House or Republicans or Democrats, no matter what position they are.
Mr. Chairman,
I will overrule the point of order. The rules of decorum refer to motive. Calling someone an idiot is not flattering, but it does not go to motive. And I believe we should have the most robust debate. I believe we should respect each other, but I don't think we should. I don't think that goes to motive, and accordingly, I'm going to overrule the point of order. Gentlemen, will proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I didn't call anybody an idiot. I said useful idiot. And secondly, I asked the witness whether he believed that as part of Vladimir Putin's strategy, Vladimir Putin was being aided by useful idiots in America. Your answer, sir.
You know, Congressman, I can't be sure to the motives of Vladimir Putin or the Russians who want to interfere with our election process in 2016, but I can be certain of one thing. Donald Trump was a private citizen at the time, and he had no more responsibility or authority to secure the integrity of the 2016 election cycle than I did. That responsibility fell to the intelligence community and the Obama-Biden administration. They clearly failed. Never did they contact under my tenure me to inform me or anyone at the campaign at the time of any potential hacking which may have been transpiring. Never did they contact us to alert us of any potential security violations as it related to the election. And so I think Mr. Comey, Mr. Brennan, and Mr. Clapper ultimately own the responsibilities as the head of the intelligence community to understand why they did not do a better job of protecting the American electorate in 2016 to ensure we didn't have foreign interference.
And Mr. Lewandowski, had they contacted you, what would have been your response in terms of notifying others on the election in terms of their dealing with Russians?
We would have worked with them. I would have recommended working through counsel to work with them to notify them of any potential contacts, which I don't ever recall having, but if we would have had any, I would have made sure we notified the appropriate authorities immediately.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewandowski, I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Johnson. The Mueller report, volume 2, page 90, says 1 month later, this is a month after your June 19th meeting, presumably after you returned from vacation, the president met again with Lewandowski, followed up on have sessions limit the scope of the Russia investigation. Just to clarify that he did do that. But I want to go back to that meeting on June 19th. The president asked you to write down word for word a script that he wanted the Attorney General of the United States to deliver. Isn't that correct?
I'm sorry, can you just give me the reference again, Congressman?
Let me do this. Previously, you testified, because it's reported in the Mueller report, that the president asked Lewandowski to deliver a message to Sessions and write this down. This is page 91. This was the first time the president asked him to take dictation. He wrote as fast as possible. The notes that you took of that are on the screen. If you could, I don't know that the notes are. I'm gonna read the section of the notes that you took that were, again, this is what you were asked to deliver to the Attorney General of the United States to announce in public. I know I recuse myself from certain things having to do with specific areas, but our POTUS is being treated very unfairly. He shouldn't have a special prosecutor counsel because he hasn't done anything wrong. I was on the campaign with him for 9 months. There were no Russians involved with him. I know for a fact because I was there. He didn't do anything wrong except run the greatest campaign in American history. That's from page 91. That's what President Trump wanted the Attorney General to say in public about the special counsel's investigation. Is that right?
I believe that's an accurate representation.
So this is in June of 2017. You said that you didn't know about the Attorney General being barred from participating, speaking out about the Russia investigation. The public didn't know about all these attempts to influence the investigation at that time. But what we did know, what everyone knew, Mr. Lewandowski, was that the president's campaign was under investigation, and they knew the Attorney General couldn't touch it because he was a major part of the campaign. He advised on national security matters, and back in March, he had recused himself. From anything having to do with the investigation. You weren't aware of that at all? That what he did in March and the fact that he had recused himself?
I was aware of the Attorney General's recusal.
And so when the president asked you to deliver a speech that he wanted the Attorney General, who could not participate in the investigation, couldn't talk about anything having to do with the investigation, he recused himself. When the president asked you to deliver that word-for-word speech for him, recused himself, you knew that he had, and you knew that he couldn't participate in any way.
I'm not an attorney, Congressman.
I'm not asking you as an attorney. I am, but that's not why I'm asking you. I'm just asking you if you knew that he had recused himself. You did, right?
I'm aware of the public reports that Jeff Sessions recused himself from the investigation.
And by recusing himself, you're aware of the public reports that, and what was in his recusal statement on March 2nd of 2017, that he wasn't going to participate in any existing or future investigations of any matters relating to the campaign for president. You knew that was out there. So when the president asked you to specifically go in there and ask him to deliver a speech, which was contrary to that, forget about being a lawyer. Did it strike you as off in any way? Were you concerned in any way?
No, sir.
Was it the right decision for Sessions to recuse himself?
Well, I can't comment on Jeff Sessions' decision-making process.
So here's what he did. The script says, a group of people want to subvert the Constitution. I'm going to meet with the special prosecutor to explain this is very unfair and let the special prosecutor move forward with investigating election mailing for future elections so that nothing can happen in future elections. The president, you'll agree, was trying to force the investigation to focus only on the future so it didn't focus on him. Isn't that right, Mr. Lewandowski?
I don't agree to that.
That's not when you look only in the future and you're not allowed to look at the one investigation into the president. That's not how you interpret that. You interpret it differently.
I think that could be your interpretation.
It is. I think it's an obvious interpretation. If we have more time, I'd ask what yours is. But I'll just close with this. A month, he asked you to do this. He brought you in to talk to the Attorney General because the president, Mr. Lewandowski, a month before your meeting, the special counsel was appointed, and the president said, "Oh my God, this is terrible." He wanted you to pressure the Attorney General, someone who wasn't even allowed to talk about the investigation, to block him from looking at his own conduct. Mr. Lewandowski, that's abuse of power. And as we go on through this investigation, I hope you'll be able to further elaborate on how you could have seen this in any other light than the obvious way the president attempted to abuse his power. I yield back.
Time has expired. The witness may answer the question.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Texas. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Radcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lewandowski, welcome to what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have alternatively described and argued over the past week as an impeachment inquiry, an impeachment investigation, an impeachment probe, and an impeachment proceeding. Now, if you're confused which one, I assure you, you're not alone. A lot of the folks that are watching today might be confused because they might be thinking that impeachment proceedings are supposed to be initiated after a vote by the full House of Representatives, and they'd be right. But you see, the Democrats, now the party of impeachment, tried that 3 times and failed miserably 3 times. Twice before the Mueller report, and then once again after the Mueller report. So last week, the party of impeachment, which is in charge of this committee, changed our rules so that they could get to impeachment in a different way. And Mr. Lewandowski, you're lucky. You're the first witness for the party of impeachment's new impeachment procedure.
I feel very lucky. Thank you.
You should. Now, I know that you've testified before the House, before the Senate, and before the special counsel. But in fairness, Mr. Lewandowski, that's when my colleagues on the other side of the aisle were promising the American people that there was going to be impeachment by collusion or impeachment by conspiracy, which, of course, didn't exist, and the special counsel said it didn't exist. So then they had to shift and say, well, now it's going to be impeachment by obstruction of justice. Remember that they promised that special counsel Mueller was going to breathe life into impeachment by obstruction of justice, but instead he put it to death. I don't know if you remember, but I asked him, can you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not conclusively determined? And his answer was, I cannot. Do you remember that? So, as it turns out, all nearly 200 pages of the Mueller report and the analysis in volume 2 of obstruction of justice was done under a legal standard and legal burden of proof that is not recognized and ever been used before in American jurisprudence. But the party of impeachment, they're going to gloss over that today. They're also going to gloss over the fact that the Inspector General criminally referred the FBI director who leaked the information to get the special counsel in the first place, and the same Inspector General who found that facts establishing that same FBI director was in fact targeting Donald Trump at the same time in an investigation where he said he wasn't investigating Donald Trump. Now, you might think that this committee would be interested in hearing from that Inspector General for the first time, hearing from you for the 4th time. But maybe you can be helpful because the party of impeachment, they don't care, Mr. Lewandowski, what kind of impeachment you can deliver for them. There are 135 Democrats and socialists in the House of Representatives that have publicly come out for impeachment. They're in agreement the president needs to be impeached. The problem is they've come up with more than a dozen different reasons that they're arguing about are the basis for that impeachment. We've talked about impeachment by collusion. We've talked about impeachment by obstruction of justice. Let's cover a few more. Impeachment under the emoluments clause. Did the first and only president rich enough to largely self-fund a successful presidential campaign ever admit to you that he secretly ran for president to get rich?
No, sir.
Okay.
He's already very rich.
Do you have any information or evidence, Mr. Lewandowski, about crimes the president committed for ignoring congressional subpoenas as a basis of impeachment?
I do not.
How about dangling pardons? Do you know if the president, did he ever admit or say to you that he would pardon anybody in law enforcement who was trying to enforce or protect our territorial borders?
At the request of the White House, I can't discuss private conversations that may or may not occur with the president.
Okay, well, how about this one? How about impeachment by using a Sharpie on a hurricane weather map? Did the president ever admit or say to you that he intentionally committed an impeachable high crime by magic marker, as some of my Democratic colleagues are contending?
Again, Congressman, I can't discuss any private conversation I may have had with the president.
I'm sorry, you're frankly not being helpful at all, Mr. Lewandowski. Maybe you don't understand that the party of impeachment, they're not picky at all. They don't even care if you don't have impeachment. If you got anything on Donald Trump, how about on Justice Kavanaugh? Because this morning, now they say they want to impeach Justice Kavanaugh. Have you got anything that supports impeachment of Justice Kavanaugh?
He's a good man.
Well, listen, I know you're disappointed that you've only been here 4 times, but don't you think that there isn't going to be another opportunity? Because this committee has become the search party for impeachment, and they're going to bring back anybody as much as they have to find something, anything to keep this impeachment hoax alive. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, 15 seconds over time. The gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lewandowski, I want to follow up from my colleague here, Mr. Deutsch. It's clear that the president was desperate for you to deliver the message to Sessions. Everyone else had said no, and he went to great lengths to make sure that you'd be effective in delivering it. After the president dictated the message, he told you to tell the Attorney General that he would be the most popular guy in the country if he delivered that message to limit the investigation to the future. Is that correct?
Could you reference me to that in the report, please?
Yes, it's in volume 2, page 92. So is that correct?
I'd like to reference
Okay, well,
that.
while you're looking, I'm going to move on. So the president is telling you how to convince Sessions to do it. It's page 92, first paragraph. To tell Sessions that he'd be the most popular guy in the country if he did what the president ordered. And the president picked you for a reason, because he knew that you had the traits of an enforcer and described yourself as his, quote, loyal soldier. This was no exception. Did you find it now?
I have it here, Congresswoman.
92. Okay, so the Attorney General, that he would be the most popular guy in the country if he delivered that message. Do you see that on page 92?
I do.
So is that correct?
I believe it's accurate.
And you told the president that you understood what he wanted Sessions to do. Is that what you told the special counsel? Same page. And you did understand what the president wanted. He not to create a trail. So looking at the slide, Lewandowski wanted to pass the message to Sessions in person rather than on the phone. Where is that? After you left the Oval Office, you didn't schedule an official meeting with Sessions. Instead, you called the Attorney General at home, correct?
If that's what's in the report.
You told Sessions to meet in person rather than on the phone. You could have just read the message from the president over the phone, but you knew that it would make it harder to persuade Sessions to do what you wanted. So you wanted to meet with him in person, correct?
If that's what the report states, yes.
So the Attorney General works at the Department of Justice, but you told the special counsel that you didn't want to meet in the Department of Justice because you knew that if you went into a government building that there's a public log of the visit, and you specifically told the special counsel that you did not want to, quote, a public log of your visit. Isn't that right?
That's accurate.
So why is that? Why didn't you want to leave a paper trail for your visit?
Well, Jeff and I are friends socially, and I want to have the opportunity to have a meal with Jeff and relay the conversation, which the president asked me to ask Jeff to consider giving.
So if that was the case, then why was there a problem with you having to do it in secret, essentially? I mean, it was a very important message you were delivering from the president, and it was a message that could certainly be viewed as completely inappropriate, considering that you were not even an employee of the White House. You're a private citizen. You're delivering a message to the Attorney General to limit the investigation. So if you didn't think you were doing anything wrong, then why would it matter that there was a public log?
I want to have the opportunity to speak with Jeff in a more relaxed atmosphere and have a meal with him to have the conversation.
Well, you said that another reason for not meeting at the DOJ was because you, quote, did not want Sessions to have an advantage over you by meeting on Sessions' turf. Is that right?
That's right. I want to have a private conversation in a more relaxed atmosphere.
So, again, if this was an appropriate message to deliver, and if it was just about that, why would it matter whose turf it was on? Why couldn't you go to his office? You're his friend. Why couldn't you go to his office and meet with him there?
I suppose I could have, but I chose to have I wanted to have a discussion with Jeff, as we have had so many occasions before that.
Exactly. I mean, I believe...
Never inside the Department of Justice.
That Sessions knew that it was wrong, and that Sessions canceled his meeting with you. If you guys were good friends, why would he have bothered to cancel it? Did he call you up to reschedule it?
That'd be a question for Jeff Sessions.
Well, after you testified, and you testified earlier that after the inauguration, you didn't communicate with the Attorney General, often your good friend that you have dinner with. So when you said that you had a message to deliver, isn't it fair to say that Sessions knew you were calling on behalf of the president and that that message was from him?
I have no idea what was in Jeff Sessions' mind.
To be clear, the Attorney General knew it was a message from the president, and he still refused to meet with you. Mr. Lewandowski, it's clear to me that Sessions knew what we all know sitting here today, that what you were doing was wrong. He wanted nothing to do with your secret messages because he knew it was entirely improper for a private citizen to go behind the backs of the White House counsel and secretly meet with him somewhere without any record of your meeting on your turf to try to persuade the Attorney General to protect the president from investigation into his own misconduct. Well, you know, you can't protect him anymore. And I'm glad that this misconduct can finally be brought to public attention so that the president can be held accountable.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The witness has requested a short recess. The committee will resume in 5 minutes. The committee stands in recess.
The House Judiciary Committee taking their first break in this hearing with Corey Lewandowski, who was the committee holding this hearing on whether President Trump obstructed justice in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. This, again, the first break in the hearing. It got underway at about 1 o'clock, and we do expect it to resume here shortly. Live coverage on C-SPAN 3. Live from Capitol Hill this afternoon, the House Judiciary Committee meeting to hear from Corey Lewandowski, President Trump's first presidential campaign manager. The committee gathering to hear whether President Trump obstructed justice in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation. The chair of the committee, Congressman Jerry Nadler, has called this first break in the hearing. We do expect it to reconvene shortly. President Trump has been paying attention to this hearing. The president, from the Associated Press, president watching former campaign aide Corey Lewandowski testify before the House's first impeachment hearings. Lewandowski wasn't answering questions that aren't already answered in the Mueller report on election interference. Democrats frustrated, and the Judiciary Committee hearing immediately devolved into chaos. Trump tweeted from Air Force One, "Such a beautiful opening statement by Corey Lewandowski. Thank you, Corey." That from the president. And if you miss any of our coverage, we will re-air it tonight on C-SPAN beginning at 9 Eastern.